Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rechak Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Exodus, the 23rd chapter. Thou shalt not raise a false report. Put not thine hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. So as the Lord is saying here, as part of, now keep in mind, this is part of the judgment or the contract / covenant that Israel would have to agree to follow, right? And so raising a false report is just as it sounds, right? You're spreading a false news, right? This is incorrect, similar to bearing false witness, as it says. And it expounds on that by saying that you're not supposed to put your hand with the wicked, is another way of saying joining with the wicked. That means those that are unrighteous, to be an unrighteous witness. So you're not an honest witness. You're somebody who either you're paid or they just tell you like, yo, just say that you saw such and such doing this and whatnot, even though it's not true. Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil. So just because the crowd is doing it, if it's wrong, you're not supposed to do it. Neither shalt thou speak in a cause to decline after many to wrest judgment. Meaning, if you are testifying, right, in a cause or in the case, you're not supposed to be swayed by the multitude to pervert. When you go into the word rest, it means to pervert or to corrupt judgment or justice. So even if you're going to be the only one and it singles you out or you stand out for it, you got to speak what's right for that sake, right? And this creates, proper order in a society. So I'll read this in another translation. Right, in the NKJV, you shall not follow a crowd to do evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute, so as to turn aside after many to pervert justice. Verse 3, neither shall thou countenance a poor man in his cause. Countenance a poor man meaning you are being partial or showing favor to a poor man because he's poor in a certain case. So what the Lord says is when you judge, you have to judge righteously. It doesn't matter if the person is poor or rich. If they're wrong, they're wrong. If they're right, they're right. That's how you judge. Verse 4, if thou meet thine enemy's ox or his ass going astray. When it says your enemy, it doesn't mean, say you see I don't know, an Ammonite, right? Or a Philistine, and no, this is talking about, an Israelite that you may not be on good terms with. You may not like him, right? You guys may just not get along. But if you see his ass or his ox going astray, meaning it's like it's straying away, it's escaping or something like that, thou shalt surely bring it back to him again. So if you see it and it's just lost out there straying somewhere, and okay, this belongs to such and such, it doesn't matter whether you don't like them or not, you got to return it back to him. If thou see the ass of him that hateth thee, once again, that enemy, lying under his burden. So the burden is the load. So if this ass is, let's say, collapsed under the load, and wouldest forbear to help him. So you may see it and you may want to forbear to help him. So you might just want to just look the other way and keep going. Thou shalt surely help him with it, or help with him, meaning you can't look the other way. It doesn't matter if you don't like this person or not. If you see a case like this, you got to help them. Thou shalt not rest, which is to pervert the judgment of thy poor in his cause. So, don't corrupt or pervert justice or refrain justice from the poor, right? If a case comes up, and this is how you have corruption seep in, right? Where a case comes up, it's maybe a poor versus somebody that's well off, and then they they pay off the judge, and then that now justice has been the poor has been robbed of justice or proper judgment. Verse 7, keep thee far from a false matter, right? And that's similar to what we read in verse 1, right? Something that is not true, a lie, a a uh, uh, a conspiracy. Okay, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, and more so involving in judgment, right? When you're judging a decision and it's based on the judgment, the outcome would be against or at the cost of the life, of the righteous or the innocent. You better make sure you judge rightly and not in, in corruption. As it says, for I will not justify the wicked, so you won't get away with it. And thou shalt take no gift, which is a bribe, for the gift blindeth the wise. So a wise person is typically, known for looking into everything and judging based on, righteous judgment, right? The evidence and everything. A gift blinding the wise means it's going to make them purposely overlook certain things, and perverteth the words of the righteous. So it would cause them to twist the truth, because they've been bribed. Also, thou shalt not oppress a stranger, going back to what we read a chapter or two ago, which the word stranger in the Hebrew here is gar. This is dealing with an Israelite foreigner, maybe one that wasn't born in the land that is dwelling there with you. You're not supposed to oppress them. For ye know the heart of a stranger. So you know what it's like to have been a stranger, seeing ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. 6 years thou shalt sow thy land, and shalt gather in the fruits thereof. So that's your cultivation, right? You're planting, you're harvesting, going through that cycle. You can do that consecutively for 6 years. But the 7th year thou shalt let it rest and lie still. So even though it's your field, you gotta let it, rest. You can't have like an official harvest and all of that. Just let it rock. And you do that, as it says, that the poor of the people. Now let me look up here something that just came to mind. See, did the process of harvesting in the ancient world involve field? Okay, so it says here, yes, the process of harvesting the land and land preparation in the ancient world very much involved burning fields, a practice widely known as slash and burn agriculture or shifting cultivation. This technique was a foundational agricultural method for millennia, dating back to the Neolithic Revolution, yada yada. Clear land. Fire was an efficient way to clear dense forests and heavy vegetation for farming in regions where open land was scarce. Fertilize the soil. The resulting ash from the burned vegetation released nutrients like carbon, potassium, and phosphorus back into the soil, creating a temporarily fertile ground for crops. Control pests and weeds. The fire temporarily eliminated weeds, insects, and pests that could harm the crops. So, if this was even implemented like once or twice within, or even 6 times, right? However many times within that span of 6 years, you can see why you would need to give the land rest, right? Because the whole process of cultivating it is, it takes a toll on the land. So the Lord said in the 7th year, you just got to let it rest. Whatever grows on it, let it grow. No harvest, no gleaning. You do it somewhere else in another part of the land. It says here, thou shalt let it rest and lie still, that the poor of thy people may eat. Because that was like a welfare system, you could say, right? Where the poor of the people, it said that even when you harvest in the law, you're not supposed to take you're not supposed to gather every single crop, right, in your field. You got to leave a few here and there so that the poor, if they stumble into your field, they might have something to eat. So here in the 7th year, being that there's no like full harvest and the land is resting, they could, pluck one or two or three. They can have something to eat here. It says, and what they leave, the beast of the field shall eat. In like manner, thou shalt deal with thy vineyard and with thy olive yards. So all your fields, right? Your vineyards, olive yards. This is the manner in which you would deal. 6 years, you can, plant and harvest. Seventh year, you let it rest. Verse 12, 6 days thou shalt do thy work, and on the seventh day thou shalt rest, which is the Sabbath. Thine ox and thine ass may rest, because most of the nature of the work back then were, you had shepherds, you had husbandmen, and different types of jobs there, right? But here, with husbandry, you would use your ox, right, to plow, to break up the earth, to do all manner of work. So you rest, and they also get to rest as well. And the son of thine handmaid, so your servants, and the stranger may be refreshed, and that's the Israelite foreigner that may be dwelling with you as well. Okay, so basically that day of rest, it's kind of like today you have the weekend, before you go back to start the week again. But this, the Lord implemented so that there would be rest, and you're not overworked, and you're not doing too much. Verse 13, and in all things that I have said unto you, be circumspect. So concerning all these things, make sure you're paying very close attention and being aware and mindful of them. And make no mention of the name of other gods. What this means is, it doesn't mean that if you were to say like Molech, oh, yeah, you've broken the law. Let's go into the word mention over here. Zakar, right? Zakar, to remember, recall, call to mind, to make a memorial. This is the real use case of it, right? So you're not supposed to make mention of the other gods as in to commemorate or to make a memorial for them, because that would be a form of honoring them, and that would be going off. That's what it means. Neither let it be heard out of thy mouth. That's what it means in the sense of memorial, right, or commemorating them, because we're only supposed to serve one God, which is the Most High, Yahweh. 3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread, right, starting with the Passover. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded thee, in the time appointed of the month Abib, which is the first month of the year. For in it thou camest out of Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. And when you go into that, read that in another translation concerning none shall appear before me empty. In the NLT it says here, no one may appear before me without an offering. All right, so you would basically bring something to offer to the Lord, like sacrifice or whatnot. Verse 16, and the feast of harvest. So you have the Passover, then you have the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors, which thou hast sown in the field, or otherwise known as the feast of first fruits. That's the second one. And the feast of ingathering, which is another way of referring to the feast of tabernacles, which is in the end of the year, when thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field. So those are the 3 times. The Passover, the feast of first fruits, and the feast of tabernacles. 3 times in the year, all thy males shall appear before the Lord Yahweh. Thou shalt not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread, neither shall the fat of my sacrifice remain until the morning. Okay, so when you, as we keep on reading, it'll even specify with some of the sacrifices, the Lord specifies unleavened bread. When you basically bring it, and sometimes it's just flour, right, or grain. And also, as it says here, neither shall the fat of my sacrifice remain until the morning, because sometimes you would burn the fat, as a part onto the Lord. But if it's either all burnt or it's discarded. Verse 19, the first of the first fruits of thy land thou shalt bring into the house of the Lord Yahweh thy God, right? The first fruits, we know that basically is dedicated to the Lord. Thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk. Now the word seethe means to boil, right, or to cook. A kid is a baby goat in his mother's milk. Now, when you look at this in, like some of the other translations, or even just look it up, some pe- some views on it would be that it's like, actually boiling a baby goat in the mother's actual milk that comes from the mom. But when you really look at that, it doesn't really make much sense, right? Because who would be doing that in the first place, right? If you're cooking a lamb, why would you be cooking that in actual goat milk, right? To be told that you shouldn't do that. And number two, well, if that was a practice, like, which who knows, it probably was, right? But if that was a practice, of boiling or cooking a baby goat inside of its mother's milk or goat milk, then somebody could just circumvent that by just cooking the goat in another goat's milk that's not the goat's mother. So why specify here the mother's milk? Okay, I think in it makes more sense to be the a goat that is still basically being weaned, right? It hasn't been weaned off of the mother's milk yet. All right, so i.e. within the first 2 months, when you look it up, that's around the time span in which it would take roughly for a goat or a kid in this case to be weaned from the mother's milk, so it's no longer being like breastfed, and then it would be good. But in that time, you're not supposed to like kill it to cook it to eat it, because it's still developing. Verse 20, behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee. And this is the Lord once again speaking on to Moses. So he says, I send an angel before you to keep thee in the way. So in the passage, as you're on your way to the land of Canaan, and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. And who is that angel? Well, who was the angel that was with them throughout the wilderness, that was guiding them, that was leading them from delivering them from Egypt all the way into the land of Canaan? It says that it was in that cloud by day and pillar of fire by night, and that has to be Yahushua, right? And I believe even Paul makes reference onto. Let's read a couple verses and then we can find that. But it says here, beware of him, i.e., be mindful of him and obey his voice. So any instruction that he would give you, follow it. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. And when you go into that, my name is in him, basically like he bears my name. All right. So he is basically like a representation or in the authority of the Lord. And he's been assigned to keep them, which is to guard, protect, and guide them to that land. So if they were to transgress or to provoke, basically they wouldn't be spared. They would be judged. And cross-reference this here. Oh, that's a good one there in Hebrews. I think there's another one that I saw. I wanted to. It might have been in Corinthians. Let's see, or maybe Hebrews. No, let's see. Tempted. There we go. Yeah, here we go. 1 Corinthians 10, and I'll start at 8. It says, neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 320,000. Neither let us tempt Hamashiach, right, which is Yahushai, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed of serpents. So when did this happen? Let's see if we can find where it is. Yep, this is what we're reading of right here. See, I think there's an account in there where they were actually being bitten by those serpents. And I'm sure I got to see if it's in the Apocrypha or not. Let's see, 1 Corinthians 10 and 9. What was the Apostle Paul referencing in First Corinthians. Is it 10 and 9? So I said. Yeah. So in First Corinthians 10 and 9, Apostle Paul references the Old Testament account in Numbers 21 and 4 to 9, where the Israelites complaining in the wilderness were bitten by venomous snakes after tempting or testing God by questioning his provision and leadership, leading to many deaths. Paul uses this as a cautionary tale for the Corinthian church, warning them not to repeat Israel's rebellion and presumption against Hamashiach, as they give here the pre-incarnate Lord. So before he was incarnated as Yahushua on the earth. So why would Paul, right, mention, as we read here, neither let us tempt Hamashiach? Why are you saying tempt Hamashiach concerning the like how the Israelites did in the wilderness? Okay, that would allude to him being back there in the wilderness with them, as we're reading of here back in Exodus, as he was sent, as the Lord said, to keep them, and if they were to transgress, he would not pardon. Verse 22. And guess what? During the time of Numbers, they were still being led by that chariot. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies and an adversary unto thine adversary. So in other words, I will fight for you. For mine angel shall go before thee and bring thee in unto the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. So the Lord was leading Israel in the wilderness by way of that angel via that chariot, which was described as being a pillar, right, a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And so the Lord is saying here, right, that I would destroy your enemies before you. So that's how we ended up having that great success in going against the inhabitants of the land of Canaan to take it over. Verse 24, thou shalt not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works. So don't follow their practices. But thou shalt utterly overthrow them, so completely overthrow them, destroy them, and kick them out the land. And quite, which means completely, break down their images, which are destroying their idols. And ye shall serve the Lord Yahweh your God, and he shall bless thy bread and thy water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. So long as you serve the Lord, you'll be blessed, right? You will not lack or want in food or water or rain, and you will not have sicknesses, right? You're going to be healthy. You're going to be good because the Lord is going to bless you. There shall nothing cast their young. This means there will be no miscarriages, right? You will be fruitful. When you go into that word, cast their young, shakal, it says here, to be bereaved, right? Or to make childless or miscarry. So you'll be fruitful, right? You won't have to worry about, miscarriages or losing your children, nor be barren, right? You're not going to have to worry about, your women being barren and not bearing children. In thy land, the number of thy days I will fulfill, meaning, in addition, I'm also going to bless you to live full lives. So if man's days are, let's say, even 80 years, it will be fulfilled. So you will live that full span. Verse 27, I will send my fear before thee and will destroy all the people to whom thou shalt come. This is why before we even, the Lord put the fear of himself and of Israel upon those nations. Hence, the Moabites try to curse us, right? When we read in the book of Joshua, before we even got to the land, even the harlot Rahab testified of that, right? That they heard and they were already afraid before Israel even got there. So that already weakened them, because by destroying their will to fight and instilling fear in them, they can be a great fighter. They can be strong men, but if they don't have the will, they might as well just surrender. It says, and I will make all thine enemies turn their backs to thee. So that means that they're going to flee before us. Because when somebody turns their back to you, they're running away in this context. And I will send hornets before thee, which shall drive out the Hivite and the Canaanite and the Hittite from before thee. And these were the inhabitants of the land. So the Lord would basically plague them little by little, making some of their dwelling places uninhabitable for them, to where they got to start moving out, and he would drive them out. As he says, I will not drive them out from before thee in 1 year. So it's not going to be all at once, lest the land become desolate. So once, if they all flee from the land, it's going to become empty. And once it becomes empty, it says, and the beasts of the field multiply against thee, because they're going to move in, and then they're going to become too much to pose a threat to Israel. And then now that's not going to be a good thing for us. So the Lord said he was going to do this. Verse 30, by little and little, I will drive them out from before thee, until thou be increased and inherit the land. Because we still had to grow, more and more, and populate more and more. And I will set thy bounds, so your borders, from the Red Sea even onto the sea of the Philistines. So from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. And let's look up here. Bounds of the land. Exodus 23. Okay. I want to see if they give more, but don't think they give that much more. All right, we'll just go with this for now. So you have, wait, is this? Nope. That's not what I'm looking for. Okay, there we go. So you have the Red Sea over here, and then you have the Mediterranean right over here, and then you got the Euphrates over here, and then you got the wilderness over here. So the western end of that land, right? If we go back, it says here, thy bounds from the Red Sea even onto the sea of the Philistines. So roughly kind of like what they have here. But if you were to go from the Red Sea up north and connect to the sea of the Philistines, you pretty much have around this side here, which is the western border. It says here, from the desert onto the river is referring to the Euphrates. So you're going as far east, boom, up to the Euphrates. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and thou shalt drive them out before thee. So if Israel indeed did follow that, we would basically have that whole territory for us if we drove them out the land. But, clearly that wasn't the case. And it wouldn't mean necessarily that every single person would be kicked out, because when we, when we went through the land, there was it Moab, I think, that the Lord said we shouldn't fight them or drive them out their land. Verse 32, thou shalt make no covenant with them, so no agreements with them nor their gods. Why? Because the second you do that, you start to become associated with them. You adopt their practices. You marry their wives, their daughters. They marry your daughters, and then before you know it, you start going off. Verse 33, they shall not dwell in thy land, right? And this is basically what they try to do in Shechem, Shechem and Hamor, when they try to form that union with the patriarchs, right? With Jacob and his sons, basically through Dinah. But clearly they weren't with that, because they were like, oh, we will become one people. The Lord didn't he separated us. We're not supposed to be one people with the heathen. They shall not dwell in thy land, lest they make thee sin against me. See? Because by being exposed to that, you would be enticed to it. And Israel has a bad habit of that. So the Lord's like, kick them out so that you're not even in the midst of temptation. For if thou serve their gods, it will surely be a snare unto thee. So it'll be like a trap onto you, because it's going to lead you into idolatry. And that's not going to be where it stops. Because now you start to break other laws and transgress further against the Lord by being obedient unto these other deities. Because in order to serve them, you got to do certain things which are against what the Lord told you to do. And that brings us to the end of the book of Exodus, the 23rd chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.